I was standing in my son's empty bedroom when my mother called to ask for the money. Not to ask how I was doing. Not to apologize for missing the funeral. She called to tell me that my sister Emma had found her dream home, a 4-bedroom colonial in Greenwich, Connecticut, and that the down payment was exactly $860,000. The same amount sitting in my son Daniel's trust fund. The same son they hadn't bothered to say goodbye to. I remember looking at the dinosaur poster still taped to his wall, the one with the T-Rex he'd pointed to every single night before bed, and I felt something inside me go completely cold. My mother was still talking, something about family obligations and how Emma deserved this after everything she'd been through, but I wasn't really listening anymore. I was done listening. My name is Rachel, and this is the story of how my parents chose a house over their grandson's memory, and how I made absolutely certain they understood the cost of that choice. Growing up in Westchester County, I learned early that I was the supporting character in my sister's story. Emma was 3 years younger, blonde where I was brunette, effortlessly charming where I was quiet and bookish. My parents, Richard and Patricia Morrison, treated her like visiting royalty. Her dance recitals were mandatory family events. Her college graduation required a catered party at the country club. When she got engaged to Brandon, a hedge fund manager from Manhattan, my mother cried actual tears of joy. When I got engaged to Marcus, a high school teacher from Brooklyn, my father asked if we'd considered waiting until Marcus found a real career. I should have seen the pattern then. But you don't want to believe your own parents have favorites. You tell yourself you're being sensitive, that you're imagining things, that love doesn't work like a competition. Except sometimes it does. Marcus and I got married in a small ceremony at a bed and breakfast in the Catskills. My parents came but left before the reception ended. Emma had a dinner reservation in the city they didn't want to miss. When Daniel was born 2 years later, my mother visited once, stayed for 40 minutes, and spent most of it on the phone coordinating Emma's engagement party. If this hits home, tell me where you're watching from. I need to know I'm not alone in this. But here's what kept me going. Daniel was perfect. He had Marcus's laugh and my stubbornness and this wild curiosity about everything. He collected rocks and asked questions about stars and wanted to be a paleontologist when he grew up. He was 6 years old, and he was my entire world. And then, on a Tuesday in March, a driver ran a red light in Queens. Marcus was taking Daniel to the Museum of Natural History. It was supposed to be a quick trip, 2 hours, maybe 3. The call came at 1:47 p.m. Daniel died in the ambulance. Marcus died in surgery 4 hours later. I became a widow and a grieving mother in the same afternoon. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday morning at a small chapel in Brooklyn, close to the school where Marcus had taught. I called my parents on Wednesday. My mother answered. I could barely get the words out that Marcus and Daniel were gone, that the service was Saturday at 10, that I needed them there. She went quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Oh, Rachel. That's the same weekend as Emma's baby shower in the Hamptons." I waited for her to say they'd cancel. To say that of course they'd be there, that nothing mattered more than supporting me through this. Instead, she said, "Emma's been planning this for months. Everyone's already committed. Your father and I are hosting. We can't just abandon her." I felt the phone slip in my hand. "Mom. Daniel is dead." "I know, sweetheart, and we're devastated. But the shower is Rachel, there are 50 guests coming. We'll visit you next week, I promise. We'll bring flowers." I hung up before she could finish. They didn't come to the funeral. Not my mother, not my father. Emma sent a text, "So sorry for your loss. Shower was beautiful. Talk soon." She attached a photo of herself opening presents, surrounded by pink balloons. I stood at that funeral with Marcus's family, with our friends, with Daniel's first-grade teacher who sobbed through the entire service. I stood there and felt the absence of my parents like a physical wound. And I made a decision. I was done pretending we were a family. Marcus and I had been careful with money. Teachers don't make much, but we'd saved, invested modestly, and when Marcus's aunt passed away 5 years ago, she'd left him a significant inheritance, nearly $900,000. We'd put most of it into a trust fund for Daniel. It was supposed to pay for college, for whatever dreams he'd have, for the life we wanted him to build. After they died, that trust reverted to me as the sole beneficiary and trustee. $860,000, sitting untouched in an account I couldn't even look at without feeling sick. I'd thought about donating it. Setting up a scholarship in Daniel's name. Anything that would honor who he was. I never imagined my parents would ask for it. 3 weeks after the funeral, my parents showed up at my apartment in Brooklyn unannounced. My mother was wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast. My father carried a folder, the kind you bring to business meetings. They didn't hug me when I opened the door. They walked in like they were conducting an inspection. "You look tired," my mother said, glancing around at the boxes I still hadn't unpacked, the dishes piled in the sink. "Are you eating?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the folder in my father's hand. He set it on the kitchen table and opened it with this practiced efficiency, like he was presenting a pitch. Inside were printed listings of houses, financial projections, mortgage comparisons. "Emma found a property," he said. "It's perfect for her and Brandon. 4 bedrooms, great school district, close to the train. They need $860,000 for the down payment." I felt my stomach drop. My mother leaned forward. "We know you have Daniel's trust fund. And sweetheart, we understand that money is emotional for you right now, but Daniel would want his family to be happy. He'd want his aunt to have a beautiful home for her children. Tap like so this story reaches someone who needs it. Because what came next, I still can't believe it happened." I looked between them. At my father's expectant expression. At my mother's thin smile. "You didn't come to his funeral," I said quietly. My mother waved a hand. "We explained that. Emma needed us. Daniel was 6 years old. He's dead. And you skipped his funeral for a baby shower." My father sighed, like I was being difficult. "Rachel, this isn't about the past. This is about helping your sister build a future. Family takes care of family." Something in me snapped. "Get out," I said. My mother blinked. "Excuse me? Get out of my apartment. Get out of my life. And don't ever contact me again." My father stood, his face darkening. "You're being irrational. We're trying to help you move forward." By stealing my son's money? By pretending he didn't matter? "We're not stealing anything," my mother said, her voice sharp now. "We're asking you to do the right thing. Emma is your sister. She's always been there for you." I laughed. It was a bitter, awful sound. She sent me a text. A single text. With a picture of balloons. My father grabbed the folder off the table. "When you calm down, you'll see we're right. That money is just sitting there, Rachel. It's not bringing Daniel back." They left. And I stood in my kitchen, shaking with rage, and I realized something: they genuinely believed they deserved that money. They thought I was being selfish for not handing over my son's entire future to fund my sister's dream house. That's when I stopped grieving and started planning. I wasn't impulsive. I didn't make rash decisions. I was a middle school librarian. I knew how to research, how to organize, how to build a narrative. And I knew exactly how to make my parents understand what they'd done. First, I called a lawyer. Her name was Janet Ruiz, and she specialized in estate planning and family law. I laid out everything: the trust fund, my parents' demand, the texts, the missed funeral. She listened without interrupting, then leaned back in her chair. "Your parents have no legal claim to that money," she said. "None. You're the trustee and beneficiary." "But I'm guessing you already knew that." "I did," I said. "I want to make sure they can never ask again." Officially. Janet drafted a formal letter, clinical, airtight, stating that the trust was closed to outside requests, that any further contact regarding the funds would be considered harassment, and that Daniel's estate was being managed according to his parents' wishes. We sent it certified mail. My father called within 2 days, furious. I didn't answer. But that wasn't enough. I needed them to feel what I'd felt standing at that funeral alone. Comment if you've ever felt this kind of betrayal. Because I need you to know, you're not wrong for wanting justice. I spent the next 2 months building something Daniel would have loved. I contacted Marcus's school in Brooklyn and proposed a scholarship fund in Daniel and Marcus's names. It would support students who showed exceptional curiosity and kindness, the things Daniel had embodied. The initial donation was $200,000 from the trust. I worked with the Museum of Natural History to create a small endowment for their education program, specifically for underserved kids who wanted to learn about paleontology. Another $150,000. I partnered with a children's literacy nonprofit in Queens and funded a mobile library program that would visit schools in low-income neighborhoods. Daniel had loved books. Marcus had taught kids to love reading. It felt right. Another $100,000. The rest, over $400,000, I placed into a managed fund that would grow and support these programs for years. Every dollar of Daniel's trust went to creating the kind of world he would have wanted to live in. And then I invited my parents to see what I'd done. The museum held a small dedication ceremony on a Saturday in June. They'd installed a plaque in the Hall of Vertebrate Origins, Daniel's favorite exhibit, with his name and a quote, "For Daniel Morrison, who loved dinosaurs and asked the best questions." I sent formal invitations to my parents and Emma. I didn't explain what the event was for. I just wrote, "You're invited to a ceremony honoring Daniel." June 14, 10 a.m. Museum of Natural History. They came. I think they were curious. Maybe they thought I'd finally come to my senses, that this was some kind of olive branch. When they arrived, I was standing in front of the plaque with Janet, the museum director, and Marcus's parents. There were about 30 people there, teachers from Marcus's school, families who'd benefited from the scholarship, kids from the literacy program holding books Daniel's fund had purchased. My mother saw the plaque first. She froze. "What is this?" she asked. I stepped forward. "This is where Daniel's trust fund went. All $860,000. It's funding scholarships, education programs, and literacy initiatives in his name." My father's face went red. "You gave it away?" "I invested it," I corrected. "In the things Daniel loved. In the kind of future Marcus would have wanted for other kids." Emma looked between us, confused. Wait, you were supposed to give that to me. No, I said simply. I was never supposed to give that to you. My mother's voice rose. Rachel, that money was for family. It was for Daniel, I interrupted. And now it's helping hundreds of kids who actually need it. Kids whose families show up for them. The museum director stepped forward, uncomfortable with the tension, and began the ceremony. He spoke about Daniel's love of learning, about Marcus's dedication to teaching, about the legacy they'd left. He invited some of the scholarship recipients to speak. A 10-year-old girl named Sophia talked about how the mobile library visited her school every week, and how she discovered books about space because of it. She held up a picture she'd drawn, a rocket ship with Daniel's name on it. My parents stood there, silent, while stranger after stranger thanked me for honoring my son's memory. Subscribe for more stories like this one. Because this moment, this was when everything shifted. When the ceremony ended, my father pulled me aside. You did this to punish us, he said. No, I said. I did this to honor my son. You punished yourselves by not showing up when he needed you. My parents didn't speak to me for 3 months. Emma called once, furious, saying I'd ruined her chance at her dream home. She and Brandon had to settle for a smaller place in Stamford. She said I was selfish, that I'd always been jealous of her, that this was just proof I'd never cared about family. I listened to her voicemail once, then deleted it. But here's what I didn't expect, the story got out. One of the teachers at Marcus's school wrote an article for a local education blog about the scholarship fund and how it had been created from tragedy. The story got picked up by a larger outlet. Then another. Suddenly, people were reaching out, donors who wanted to contribute, schools that wanted to partner, families who shared their own stories of loss and resilience. The fund grew. Within a year, it had doubled. We expanded the programs, reached more kids, created more opportunities. And my parents saw all of it. Because Emma, in her anger, had posted about it on social media, complaining about how I'd wasted Daniel's money instead of helping family. The post backfired spectacularly. People called her out. They called my parents out. The comments were brutal. My mother finally called in September. People are saying terrible things about us online, she said. Her voice was small, shaky. They're saying we're bad grandparents. That we abandoned you. I didn't say anything. Rachel, we need you to make a statement. Tell people it's not true. But it is true, I said quietly. You didn't come to Daniel's funeral. You asked for his trust fund to buy Emma a house. That all happened. We made a mistake, she said. But this public humiliation, it's too much. You humiliated yourselves, I said. I just refused to pretend it didn't happen. She hung up. 6 months later, my father showed up at my apartment again. This time, he was alone. He looked older. Tired. He stood in my doorway and said, "Your mother and I have been thinking." I waited. "We want to make things right," he said. "We'd like to contribute to Daniel's fund. As a way of showing we care." I studied his face. There was no remorse there. Just calculation. Just damage control. How much? I asked. $10,000. I almost laughed. $10,000. After they'd demanded $860,000. Keep it, I said. Donate it directly if you want. But don't do it because you think it'll fix what you broke. Rachel, we're trying. You're trying to make yourselves feel better, I said. You're trying to stop people from calling you out online. You're not trying to fix anything with me. He looked down. What do you want from us? Nothing, I said. I don't want anything from you anymore. He left without another word. If you've ever had to let go of family because they couldn't show up for you, drop a comment. Let's talk about it. Emma reached out a year and a half after the ceremony. She didn't call. She showed up, just like our parents had, but this time she came alone, and she came crying. She stood in my doorway, mascara running, and said, "Brandon left me." I didn't invite her in, but I didn't close the door either. He said I'm too focused on what everyone else has. That I don't appreciate what we have. She hiccuped. That I don't know how to be grateful. I leaned against the doorframe. Why are you telling me this? Because you were right, she said, her voice breaking. About the house. About the money. About all of it. I didn't even ask how you were doing after Daniel died. I didn't think about what you were going through. I wanted what I wanted, and I didn't care. It wasn't the apology I'd imagined. It wasn't neat or complete. But it was something. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I looked at my little sister, standing there broken and finally aware of how much damage she'd caused, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the very beginning of it. Come in, I said. Emma and I didn't fix everything overnight. Trust doesn't work like that. But we started small. Coffee once a month. Texts that weren't just transactional. She came with me to visit Daniel's plaque at the museum. She cried when she read it. He was such a sweet kid, she said. I barely knew him. I know, I said. She started volunteering with the literacy program, tentatively at first, then with real commitment. She read to kids in the mobile library on weekends. She donated money from her divorce settlement to the scholarship fund. It wasn't redemption. But it was effort. My parents, though? They never came around. Not really. They sent a Christmas card 2 years later with a generic note about family being important. They didn't mention Daniel. They didn't ask how I was doing. They signed it Love, Mom and Dad, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. Because here's what I learned, some people will only acknowledge their mistakes when it's convenient. When the social cost of ignoring you becomes too high. When they need something from you again. And I didn't need to keep the door open for people like that. Not even if they were my parents. 5 years after the accident, the scholarship fund has supported 43 students. 12 of them are in college now. One is studying paleontology at Columbia. She sent me a letter last year thanking me for making her education possible. The literacy program reaches 8 schools across Queens and Brooklyn. Over 600 kids have participated. Teachers send me photos sometimes, kids curled up with books, smiling, discovering stories they love. The museum program hosts field trips every month for schools that couldn't otherwise afford them. They see the dinosaurs Daniel loved. They ask the questions he would have asked. His name is everywhere in this work. His memory is alive in ways I never imagined. And me? I'm still here. Still standing. I left the apartment in Brooklyn, too many ghosts, and moved to a quieter neighborhood in Astoria. I still work at the library. I still think about Marcus and Daniel every single day. But I also know something now that I didn't know before. Grief doesn't have to be the only thing you carry. You can take the weight of what you've lost and build something with it. Something real. Something good. That's what Daniel's trust fund became. Not a house for people who didn't show up. Not a monument to their absence. But a future for kids who needed someone to believe in them. If this story moved you, share it. Because maybe someone else needs to hear that they're allowed to choose themselves. That they're allowed to say no to people who only show up when it's convenient. Here's the truth I've had to accept: some people will love you conditionally. They'll love you when you're useful. When you're compliant. When you're not asking them to sacrifice anything that matters to them. And when you stop being those things? When you start setting boundaries, demanding respect, expecting them to show up the way you've always shown up for them? They'll call you selfish. They'll say you're overreacting. They'll rewrite history to make themselves the victims. My parents did that. They told extended family I'd cut them off for no reason. They said I was bitter, that grief had made me cruel, that I'd stolen Emma's future out of spite. They never mentioned the funeral they skipped. They never mentioned demanding my dead son's money. They never mentioned any of it. And for a while, that hurt worse than anything. But then I realized, their version of the story doesn't matter. The truth doesn't need their permission to exist. The plaques are real. The scholarships are real. The kids reading books in that mobile library are real. Daniel's legacy is real. And I built it without them. If you're watching this and you're in a place where your family is asking you to sacrifice your grief, your boundaries, your dignity for their comfort, I want you to know something. You don't owe them that. You don't owe anyone access to your pain. You don't owe anyone forgiveness before you're ready. You don't owe anyone a relationship just because you share DNA. What you owe is this: the truth. The boundary. The choice to honor what matters to you, even when other people call it selfish. I honored my son. I honored my husband. I honored the life they deserved to live by making sure other kids got the chances they didn't. And my parents? They'll have to live with the fact that when it mattered most, they chose a house over a grandson. They chose convenience over love. They chose wrong. I can't fix that for them. But I can make sure Daniel's name means something. That his 6 years on this planet mattered. That his curiosity and kindness and joy didn't disappear when he did. That's enough. That's more than enough. If this story made you think, made you feel, made you realize you're not alone, subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me your story. Because we all deserve to be heard. We all deserve to be seen. And we all deserve people who show up. Thank you for listening to mine.